Year 9, today we have a lesson 9B, text 9B, that is lesson 13, the use of inverted commas. Our text today is going to be used in our understanding of the use of the inverted commas. How do we use inverted commas? It is an aspect of grammar, and the better we know how to use them, it will be important for us to know how to handle matters pertaining to direct speech. And that will come later, but as for now, we shall have to go direct to the text. But it's important for you to know that inverted commas are punctuation marks that are used in writing to show where speech or quotation begins and ends. They are usually written or printed as this way: inverted commas. Come home. Inverted commas. They are opening and closing. Inverted commas. It's only that I cannot invert them here. You see, this one is on something like this, and then you'll see something like this, and like this. When they are printed, they are the inverted commas. So whenever you see them, you know that this is a punctuation mark. And as punctuation helps us to propagate our aspects of language, because the full stop has its role, the comma, the colon, the semicolon, the exclamation mark, the question mark, etc., etc. So these ones are called inverted commas because they are somehow inverted. They are inverted. So you find them like this. Instead of a comma being like this, something like this, you find that they are inverted. This one is going up, this one is coming down, like that. This one is going up like that, like that. This one is coming down like that. So they are opening and closing inverted commas. Opening and closing inverted commas. So, to say the least, the inverted commas are punctuation marks that are used in writing to show where speech or a quotation begins and where it ends. That is why they are called opening and closing inverted commas. One more thing we need to know is that the inverted commas have been used in this passage. So ours is to read the passage, and then we bear in mind where the inverted commas have been used. Ma Ramoswe had a detective agency in Africa at the foot of Gale Hill. These were its assets: a tiny van, white van, 2 desks, 2 chairs, a telephone, and an old typewriter. Then there was a teapot in which Ma Ramoswe, the only private detective in Botswana, brewed red bush tea. And 3 mugs, one for herself, one for her secretary, and one for the client. What else does a detective agency really need? Detective agencies rely on human intuition and intelligence, both of which Ma Ramoswe had in abundance. The inventory would ever include those, of course, but there was also the view which again could appear on no inventory. How could any such list describe what one saw when one looked out from Ma Ramoswe's door? To the front, an acacia tree, the thorn tree which dots the wide edges of the Kalahari, the great white thorns, the Kalahari desert. A warning, the olive gray leaves, by contrast, so delicate. In its branches, in the late afternoon or in the cool of the early morning, one might see a go-away bird or hear it robber. And beyond the acacia or the dusty road, the roofs of the town under cover of trees and scrub bush. On the horizon, in a blue shimmer of heat, the hills, like improbable, overgrown termite mounds. Everybody called her Ma Ramoswe, although if people had wanted to be formal, they would have addressed her as Me Ma Ramoswe. This is the right thing for a person of stature, but which she had never used of herself. So it was always Ma Ramoswe rather than Precious Ramoswe, a name which very few people employed. She was a good detective and a good woman. A good woman in a good country, one might say. She loved her country, Botswana, which is a place of peace, and she loved Africa for all its trials. I am not ashamed to be called an African patriot, said Ma Ramoswe. That is where I want you to just pick it from. I'm not ashamed to be called an African. You know, that is direct speech. The only thing we see there is a comma, said Ma Ramoswe. But those words are direct, the way they were spoken. I love all the people whom God made, but I especially know how to love the people who live in this place. They are my people, my brothers and sisters. It is my duty to help them to solve the mysteries in their lives. That is what I'm called to do. In idle moments, when there were no pressing matters to be dealt with, and when everybody seemed to be sleepy from the heat, she would sit under her acacia tree. It was a dusty place to sit, and the chickens would occasionally come and peck about her feet, but it was a place which seemed to encourage thought. It was here that Ma Ramoswe would contemplate some of the issues which, in everyday life, may so easily be pushed to one side. Everything, thought Ma Ramoswe, has been something before. Here I am, the only lady private detective in the whole of Botswana, sitting in front of my detective agency. But only a few years ago, there was no detective agency. And before that, you see, if this is like words that I've spoken, that she said, which needs to be quoted, I shall tell you more about that. I repeat, everything, thought Ma Ramoswe, has been something before. Here I am, the only lady private detective in the whole of Botswana, sitting in front of my detective agency. But only a few years ago, there was no detective agency. And before that, before there were even any buildings here, there were just the acacia trees and the riverbed in the distance and the Kalahari over there, so close. In those days, there was no Botswana even, just the Bechuanaland Protectorate. You know, when the white man was in Africa, he separated countries in regions. He demarcated in what we call protectorates. That's why in Africa, in East Africa, we had the East African Protectorate, ruled under a white governor. So here she talks about Bechuanaland Protectorate. And before that, again, there was Kama's country, a lounge with a dry wind in their mains. But look at it now. A detective agency right here in Gaborone. With me, the fat lady detective sitting outside and thinking these thoughts about how what is one thing today becomes quite another thing tomorrow. It is important when we read this passage like this, you have your book and then you fix your eyes on the book. As I read, you are going through it. That's why I'm as low as possible, so that we get the exact words. That is my first part. When I come next, I shall go straight to the finishing of this passage, and then we look a bit at what is the passage telling us about